All right, man. So let's get into it, Marco. Hello and welcome to Duality, episode 3 with your co-hosts CJ and Marco. How we
Hello.
feeling today, Marco?
Oh man, on top of the world. How are
On
you
top of
feeling,
the
CJ?
world, dude. I can't complain, man. I can't complain. It was a good day. So we're gonna talk about a couple of things. We're gonna riff off some stuff that we did last episode, but we're gonna switch up the platform a little bit. Last time we started off with a little bit of like dating advice and things of that nature. We're actually gonna start off with more of like a self-encouragement message
That would be a
and
bad
just how
idea.
to build a better life. So we're gonna start off with how to build a better life, man or woman. These are some of the first steps that you should do. So let's get into it, Marco. So I always like what you said in our first episode. It starts at home, and it truly does. It starts with the individual, and if anything else, that individual's family and who's raising them. But I think it's an important point for you to make that the individual, you are in control of your own destiny. You know, man or woman, you have to avoid being programmed, as they call it, and you always have to remember that you are a sovereign individual. Don't start falling into social media traps. Don't start falling into social vector traps. Always be your own person.
Yeah, don't let it devalue you. Don't let it feel like, you're worthless or you're not worth anything because ultimately that's going to just come down to your self-confidence and how you really feel about yourself ultimately. Any confident person or human being, they know they don't need social media. They don't need these platforms. They know who they are
Mm-hmm.
and they're completely okay with that. So be okay with yourself. Learn to just develop some confidence, and I promise you'll be okay.
Yeah, it really all starts with yourself, and more specifically with your mind. And you have to always control your mind.
Always.
If you let yourself be wishy-washy and controlled by everything you see, and as you go through life, you're just going to get blown around like a feather in the wind. And maybe sometimes it'll be good, sometimes it'll be bad, but you won't have any control.
Exactly.
You know?
And I believe like they call that self mastery. It's
Yeah.
mastering of the self, and that can be a lifelong journey. But once you really learn to instill these types of disciplines and values within your head, you won't need anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You won't need no opinions. You won't need social media
Mm-hmm.
or anything of that sort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, man. I do want to bring up the point that you have to be humble in life, and it's something that everyone will learn on their own terms. But I think
Yeah,
there's something really good that you
exactly.
said
I believe
before.
I told you earlier, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you aren't humble in life, then life will humble you.
Mm-hmm.
So humility can come from two places. It can either come from just coming from humble beginnings, knowing what it's like to mold yourself and build yourself and go through all the bullshit. And and you can empathize with others because you've been in lower places in life and you got to this stage because of your hard work and people who probably helped you. And one of the things that will teach you humility is never forgetting where you come from and never forgetting those who helped you get there. And if you aren't humble, well, I mean, just look around you, man. Life always has a way with humbling people. Our boy McGregor, you see, he got hit. He was riding his bike and he got hit.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was, posted it, but he felt very grateful. And I don't know
What
McGregor. I
happened?
don't know him personally. And
What happened to Hawkeye, the actor played
yeah,
Hawkeye?
yeah,
He got crushed by his own
and
snowboard.
that's horrible too.
And I don't
You
wish
know,
that on anyone, but you see, even when you feel like I mean, there's so many examples. Kobe Bryant,
yeah, rest in peace,
God
Kobe.
bless him and his daughter.
Rest in peace, Goat. Yeah,
I mean, but like at any point in time, it can happen. It doesn't matter who you are, you know? And that's why I think it's important that you be humbled in life, because if you think you're on top of the world, life has a funny way of teaching you that it's not at that exact point in time. You know, so always be humble. If you're going to be successful, if you're going to try and change your life, you have to humble yourself first. That has to be the first step. And like you said, either you're humble and you've learned that lesson, or life is going to teach it to you.
and you'll just have a lot more of a positive environment when you're humble. People
Mm-hmm.
will respect you more. You'll receive love a lot more. I don't care
Mm-hmm.
who you are. I think every human being on the face of the earth wants respect. They want love and they want
Absolutely.
respect.
Absolutely.
But if you aren't humble,
you're
Don't
not
be
going to get
surprised when
that.
you don't get
You're
either of these things, and that's when life will just boop, judo toss you right on top of your
toss. I was going
face.
to say toss
You
you
know what I
right
mean?
out.
Exactly, exactly.
And I actually think that is a really good transition into like finding motivation within dedication, as I like to call it, because there is a lot of people who are not humble, who came from decent. I'm not even going to say crazy good beginnings. I'm just going to say decent beginnings where they didn't have to worry about much.
Yeah,
And because of that, because of the way social media works, a lot of those people are not humble. They actually think they're at least somewhat on top of the world in a lot of cases. And that's very dangerous because when you even start with just a little bit of resources, you realize that you can easily turn that into something
but
great.
where do you think that opposite comes from? Where do you think that comes from?
What do you mean? What
Like
in terms of the
in
opposite?
terms of this arrogance, right, where people don't
Oh,
understand humility. Where do you think that comes from?
it comes from a lack of any real problems growing up, any real problems, not only through your childhood, but any real adversity in your childhood, any real problems or adversity throughout college and
Yeah,
even the start of your young life.
it's like money, right? So there's a difference
Hmm.
between earning
Hmm.
and spending,
There's
right?
there's a huge difference.
So when somebody doesn't have to earn money and it's just handed to them,
They don't understand the
they
value
don't
of it.
understand the value of it. They don't understand the worth or what it's like to
If
earn. They're just like, give me
Marco, if
so I can
you
spend it.
got it, let's just pretend like this, right? You never had to worry about anything. You always had a stable home, which I'm not. Hey, I'm not knocking people that come from that. I come from that, and you know what? You shouldn't knock yourself or your parents. But imagine this. We'll ramp it up a little bit. We'll go towards the other end of the spectrum. You
Of
come from
course.
a nice home, upper middle class, and every year since you turned 18 till you
Yeah.
were 26, you got $100,000. Would you really know the value of that? No. And now let's say
No, I mean, I mean, we wouldn't, definitely not, but other people would.
well, absolutely. But would you, the kid in that situation, understand the value of that?
Probably not. I mean, no,
If
not
you
if,
were just if so the average man makes $37,000 to $50,000, okay, a year. So if you're just getting handed twice what the upper level of the average man makes, and then you actually have to turn around after that's all, dried up, essentially it's your trust fund, and you have to go and work for that now. You're never you're not even going to realize how much money that was until you sit there and you work for it. And now you try to make $100,000 that year on your own doing something. You know, until you do something like that, you're never going to realize the worth of it. And that's how people that don't have trauma, people that come from better beginnings, that's how they get outpaced by people in life, man. Because they don't understand the value of
and
things.
I think a lot of anger spews from these people who don't really work for nothing.
Oh yeah,
A lot of people just expect things
they
to be
feel, and it's whew,
handed to them,
especially with social media.
especially the people who don't have
Mm,
to work for anything, right? They feel entitled
exactly. You hit the
to
nail
getting
on the head
handed
with that
something
word.
rather than earning it. I'll
Hmm.
tell you something, man. There's nothing like earning something, man.
Oh yeah,
I don't like things personally being handed to me. I find value in earning them uh,
the best
personally, but
one of the best moments of my life, Marco, besides buying my mom her car, was walking on to the Chevy dealership that's right over here. If you pass it on the way on my house on 75 right there, and walking in there and buying it, outright buying that $30,000 Malibu. It's the first thing I was ever able to get. It wasn't a Camaro, it wasn't a Tahoe, it wasn't a Suburban, but I outright bought it and I earned it.
if anything, though, it's just a testament to who your mother is. She's a wonderful human being.
Mm-hmm.
She has really good values. She's super disciplined,
Mm-hmm.
and she raised you, and she raised you really well. And I
Well,
think that's why you're a humble kid. You know, your mom's taught you how to earn everything,
mm-hmm.
and you felt like it was time to buy her a car. A lot of people aren't out there, doing that for hell, even their own parents, man. There's definitely value in that.
Here's the problem that I realized, Marco, and it's a lot more. Unfortunately, it's a lot more common than not. You see people get out of college, and even like the people that do start making money, they kind of leave their family in the dust, right? They just and that's almost what's being promoted now. It's like as soon as you're out of college, go. And I
They
get
want
that, and
to
I understand
they
that.
want to get rich and they want to live a life of just straight up hedonism.
Exactly.
You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yes. Exactly.
It's
You
just
know, I get that. Like you're your own person. You're 21, 22. Get out there, get your own life. But if your parents or your parent is hurting, and you actually start making money too, at least the way I was raised, you kind of have somewhat of a responsibility there. You know what I mean? And I actually, this is something we didn't even write down on our little cheat sheet today, but something that I would like to get into. The rate of houses on a block, what's owned by the local community and what's owned by a bank. 7 out of 10 houses on the block, just like this, are owned by a bank. Okay, so that means that only 3 out of 10 houses on average on a block are actually owned by that person that's living in there or by someone else in the community that is renting it out. Right.
Does that mean that the bank could just come in and be like,
That
"Oh,
means that
we
the
need to
bank.
get the
That
fuck out of here.
means
We need this
that
house.
the
Get the fuck out."
no, 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 no. That
No.
means that the bank is making money off your mortgage payment every month. The interest that you're paying, that's
Yeah.
going to the bank. Whereas if you were renting it from someone who lived on the block, yeah, you're still making someone money, but guess what? It's going right back into the local community. The point is so many people, especially my age, 25, 26, complain about the fact that all these homes are owned by Wall Street essentially. And look at how our culture and how westernized America is. We are prompted to get out of college, go and get an apartment essentially, right? And not take care of the house. So you can only blame capitalism so far. There's also culture behind that, and the fact that when you look at your Eastern Europe, and when you look at you know cases like that where it is not that severe, where the bank owns that many homes, it's because the average person in Eastern Europe, not in the UK, which is an extremely progressive state there, you know, they come home from college, which by the way, it's free in Europe for citizens. They come home from college and they stay home until they're about 30.
I'm
That's
sure.
probably why that
I'm sure
statistic is a
there's a
lot
reason
lower.
why it's free, though, man. I'm sure they're taxing the hell out of the people
Oh
there,
yeah,
and it's
but
coming
you
out of the
see,
taxpayer. I mean, I don't know how
it's
those kind of policies work over there in
it
another country,
probably
but
it's probably a shit ton of taxes, and I can tell you from a lot of countries there, it definitely is. Like the tax up there is ridiculous. However, the strategy people form is a lot smarter. That's why they own more. That's why people from Eastern Europe can come over here and get an education, go back there, and then live the life
yeah,
essentially.
and also take note that that's how you get ahead. You know, these people are thinking how to get
Mm-hmm.
ahead, so you're gonna have to apply that in life. You're gonna have to apply things to help you get ahead. Because if you're not ahead, you're gonna be behind.
Yeah. Don't ever just try and stay on pace. That's a very good point. There are so little instances where you'll be perfectly on pace, and even if you are, why the hell do you want to be average? You know, there's
What's wrong
really
with being average, though?
the problem with being average is that average in Western society is kind of like the working class man, which is almost like the slave labor. I love that comparison. Every society needs some type of slave
I
labor.
strongly dislike though how the hardworking American man is considered that though.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
fucked up.
I mean, slave labor, I completely understand, right? But I really don't think there's anything with hell, man or woman, just making a fair wage,
Well, think about it
even
like
if it is considered average, right?
think about it like this. If you make 40, $50,000 a year and you have regular expenses and you're even single, you might save some money, but you're never gonna get what you want. You can say at that rate, you won't get what you want. You are
Yeah.
literally just working in a loop, essentially.
And if you're one of those people that don't know how to get ahead, that's kind of what the show is.
That's what we're here for.
Hopefully, we can provide you tools, or help CJ can provide you the tools to help you try to understand the methods on how you can get ahead.
First thing I would recommend is start your own business. You start your own business. I've experienced this
But
from.
let's be realistic, though. You can tell them to start their own business, but
You have to look
how are they
before
going to
all
know how
that.
to do that? You know,
Before, well, I'll tell you one thing. A
where are
lot
they
of
going
it
to
is
start? You
a
know,
lot of it is learning as you go. But if you want to be strategic about it, you need to start something that's going to make you money where you're not going to have to work it 1000% of the time. I've learned that from personal experience. But the thing I really do want to point out to people is the difference between owning a business and the difference between having a job is you can get a decent promotion at a job. Seen people, I've known one person from college who got basically a double promotion at once. He was managing an IKEA in Cleveland, Ohio. He got transferred down here and promoted to a higher level of manager. And management jobs here in Texas pay quite a bit, and they pay shit in Ohio. So guess what? He got like a $40,000, and he almost doubled his salary. And that was very lucky though. And he also had a boss that was looking out for him. And I won't even undercut the fact that he is a great people person and works extremely hard and is extremely religious and a very well-to-do person. So all those things kind of come into play. But the fact of the matter is, you probably will never see that working a regular job unless you get that lucky. And that's a one in a million. You will probably see minor increases here and there statistically every 5 to 10 years if you're working in corporate. But you're never going to see you go from making $3,000 a month to $8,000 a month. Never going to see that working a regular job. You at least have a chance to see that doing a business. I've experienced that personally, and it is a wonderful feeling.
And don't let the
Wonderful.
whole business talk thing intimidate you. You know, um, let it kind of be a motivating factor. It's
Mhm.
a learning process.
Mhm.
Everything's going to take time to learn.
Mhm.
So don't be impatient. Because
Hey,
I, of all people, can understand how discouraging that can be. But if you just take the time and you apply these methods, they will help you.
absolutely. And like we'll come back to, it all comes back to the individual. It all starts with the individual. And as a young man, that's hard because you try and go into business and you will, especially if you try and do partners and you're not good with your gauge, you will get taken advantage of. So my biggest thing is stick to that whole individuality concept, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur. Undermining all that, in my opinion, which would make you a better person and more efficient in business, something that you somewhat touched on before when you spoke about my mom, the implementation of traditional values. Now, I'm extremely lucky. I was kind of grown up with, I'd say, about 8 to 9 out of 10 traditional values if I were to do a checklist. You know what I mean? It's no, like, my parents weren't straight traditional. They were strict in a lot of cases and not in others, but they definitely hit the nail on the head in a lot of instances. Marco, you could tell me, and I already know your upbringing was a lot different. You know, and it might not have been as traditional. But you see, because you're such a strong individual, you are able to instill those values in yourself. Just because you weren't growing up traditional doesn't mean you can not be that way
Well,
or
it's all
not
about
instill
what
those
you're willing to
values.
tolerate. You know,
Oh yeah.
especially as a man in this world. Uh, you really have to find ways to build yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways to do that is to build yourself upon values.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a valueless person, you're going to get treated like a valueless person. But if you're a person who can build yourself and develop a moral compass and
Mm-hmm.
develop certain traditions, and traits, you're going to be a lot more received and a lot more respected.
It's like this. If you don't have morals, if you don't have something to you, then there's almost like Jordan Peterson said, there's nothing to you. You're just a feather in the wind.
And these are all the
And
traits that separate us from the animals in the wild.
mm-hmm.
So it's important to try to use these traits and apply them in life.
Here's the problem though. Western, especially modern westernized society, doesn't encourage that type of thing. We were just talking about this earlier, right?
We got to
How,
find a way, CJ. I'm sorry to cut you off,
yeah, go
but
ahead.
we have to find a way to not let this whole Western stuff affect us. We have to find a way to build our own culture, right?
You can't be programmed.
You
That's
can't let it program you. You can't
that's
let
the take
I
home.
don't care if it's politically motivated. I don't care if it's you know you're in a cult.
Hmm.
You can't allow yourself to be manipulated.
Hmm. Once you do that, you're done. You're gonna go wherever that group or wherever that person wants you to,
And also
and it's
understand
dangerous.
it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. You're going to break down. Who knows? Depending on what kind of person you are, you might get overly emotional. You
Hmm.
know, but it's going to be a roller coaster. But
And
it's going to be one that was worth getting on.
here's the thing, and I do want to make a good point of this. Society doesn't teach young men traditional values, and it's the same thing can be said for women as well. It teaches you to go out and have fun. Life is very materialistic. Life is about Instagram
There's
posts.
no
Life is
building.
about cars.
It's not
There's no
about
building.
building anything.
It,
It's not about building a relationship. It's not about building. It's about taking. It's about showing off. These
mhm,
values, man. They make it all about taking,
mhm,
taking,
mhm.
taking, or earning, which that's one the most preferable method. But
I mean, but there's still so much of a lack of spirituality there, and that's because you've eliminated.
what are you talking about? There's plenty of
Well,
spirituality.
I'm sorry. There's a lack of a higher purpose. No, and I'll be quite honest with you,
Good
at least
vibes
in my
only.
opinion. What's up?
Good vibes only.
Yeah, good vibes only, right? But to be quite honest with you, there's a lack of the sense of family. There's a lack of a higher purpose. There's a lack of creating something that is not solely monetarily based, right? You really think that a great grandmother who has all these kids and great grandkids looks at that room and sees materialistic things? No, she sees like all these souls, right? That she has been a part of and that she has in some way, shape, or form birthed into the world. You know, that image, that type of thing, that's pretty much going out of Western society, and it's extremely unsettling because it's a very incomplete life. But I think a lot of things that can save that sort of thing are traditional values and trying to instill traditional values in young men and in young women alike because that can only benefit everyone involved. You know, but I sadly have to say that I think a lot of what the upper echelons, what the elites want, is a split home.
Talk
You
about the
know,
elite, and the elites just want to control everything.
of course,
They
they
want
want you to
everything
consume.
within their control.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they have their own special clubs.
Mm-hmm. That's why they have their own
You know,
special fucking
they
islands
have their
that they
own
go
islands
to,
and their own clubs, their islands that they go to
hook up with,
do all their little creepy shit that
twelve-year-old
they do.
chicks.
And they don't want to see you succeed. They don't want to
Where's
see
that
us
list? Where's that
succeed.
list, by the way? No, we're not even going to get into that. We'll do that in a much more thoroughly
I know,
researched episode.
I know somewhat about the case, but not enough to make to be
Nah.
boasting
Well,
about it.
we'll save that for next time because we're gonna do our homework before we really get into that. But you know what? We'll transition and we'll end on something a little bit lighter this week. Let's talk about dating women my age or younger, which is something that Marco does not do, and is something that I do not do
It's not that I
quite a
don't
bit.
do it; it's that I don't tolerate it.
And I'm the same way. I'll last one date, and most of the time I'll fucking walk midway through that date. So to be quite honest with you, we're not going to give you dating advice with chicks younger than us. We're going to give you something a little bit more framed for us, and that's called rules of engagement. So, if you did not like my whole little spiel about dating older women and you're like, that's nasty, Chase, I think you're stupid. But if you still want to go after the 22-year-old chick that's getting offers every other Tuesday, here's some rules of engagement. When you add her on, and both me and Marco do this, by the way, and we didn't even know we both did this before we explained it to each other. When you add her on social media, or vice versa, when she adds you, you go to her profile, you like maybe one, maybe two pics. That's it. Then you go, whatever it is, Instagram, you mute her entire
I
profile.
like to
You
call
turn
it.
off her
I like to
stories,
call it like what,
everything.
yeah, like what they call it reaching. I like to
Mm-hmm.
call it pulling and trying
Mm-hmm.
to pretty much see. You know, Pulling's probably it's like roll.
No, that's a very
It's
good
like
term.
trying to like, oh, I'm liking pictures, so maybe she'll notice me
Mm-hmm.
enough to maybe give me the same acknowledgement. But it's an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing when
Right.
you do
Right.
that.
Well,
You know,
I will say from a young man, especially if you're a 22, 23-year-old man, I highly encourage you to do that. Remember we spoke about this
and
a
there
time or
and
two
and, and
ago?
and and gentlemen, if anyone that's listening to this, just know there's no advice any of these so-called gurus
Nah.
could
Nah.
give you, that I could give you, that CJ could give you, that is going to help you get girls. You are going to have to literally go out there and experience that for yourself. You have to go face rejection.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find out who you are and how you can implement this game, uh, you know,
That we're discussing
to
essentially.
girls. So it
Exactly.
all comes from experience,
Exactly.
trial and error, pretty much.
Let me frame it like this. If you're more traditional like ourselves and you do not tolerate bullshit from chicks, this is a good list of rules of engagement. You mute them on social media, you I like that term. You pull instead of reach, and you see what they do. If they view your story, maybe sometimes you view their story back in return. They comment on your story at first, just like it. Don't even say anything back. You allow them to keep reaching because at the end of the day, although that's not very manly, women in their prime are pretty much getting everything they want and more nowadays. And the way I look at it as a young man, you should basically be building at that point. So stop distracting yourself, right? We always
Yeah,
talk about
and a lot of
distractions
these
and
girls, man, a lot of them are gonna have options.
mhm. Mhm.
Not that there's anything like wrong with that. They can't help that,
Oh.
I'm sure, but just take that into consideration. So don't just be another option
Women don't compete, they choose.
for
Remember
them.
that. Those
Well, they compete
options
with each other,
they
CJ.
compete with each other for the top percentage of men. But other than that, they pretty much choose. And a lot of women, especially nowadays, the way society is going, would rather choose instead of compete for that top male. And that's why they go after the simp, because that's them completely choosing someone that's going to.
I think it's a manipulation thing,
Of
man.
course it is. It's a control. It's a control.
Boys and girls are just taught two different, they're taught two different ways. Women for the most part are, manipulative, and us men, of course, we are driven by sex.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's why it works so well for women.
I mean, is it really their fault though?
Nah, man,
Because
because
a lot of the shit that's happening now, like,
as we were just
ladies, it's not even really your fault. A lot of these guys are just, they're frustrated. What pisses me off is these same people that are angry and frustrated are the first ones asking to see your titties or throwing money at you for existing. These are the same guys.
That's true.
And
That's very true.
And it fucks it up for real men, who, necessarily just try to shoot their shot, but they've been shot at so many times.
They've been shot at so many times with such a larger caliber that to you, even though you might think you're ahead in life,
I gotta fire a fucking cannon to get
exactly.
shit,
you gotta fire the fucking the entire 4th of July fireworks parades to get that attention. You know what I mean? And that's a shame, because we spoke about this earlier, and we touched on this last week. There really was a time where older men could swoop in and get the young 22-year-old, and we didn't really go this far because they still can, but guess what? They still can't find the young, beautiful 22-year-old with values. That's still hard.
Whose fault is that though? But
that's men.
It's our
That's
fault.
men.
It ultimately boils down to us fellas. We are the root cause of all this bullshit happening. You got to learn to think with the head that matters, and stop thinking about the head.
And before you as a man get mad at me and Marco, picture this. Look, it is really man's fault at the end of the day.
You have to have accountability. You have to have accountability.
But just ask yourself this: why is that girl acting that way? Do you think her father raised her right? No. So yeah, it does come back to men, right? It might not be this generation of men, but it's the last generation of men that just weren't there as a father, didn't teach respect. And the same thing can be said on the man's side. If they had a son, they didn't teach him how to be a gentleman. They didn't teach him how to hold the door. They didn't teach him how to just treat a woman and how to talk to a woman. That's why no one fucking knows. And now you got social media. And no one fucking knows how to talk to women.
CJ just hit the nail on the head, and that is why shit is the way it is, because of a lot of fucking bastards.
Exactly.
A lot of fatherless fucking people.
Fucking, that's why you got men that, you said this last episode, don't even know how to talk to women, but will just throw money at them for breathing. That has literally been encouraged by the situation that my generation has been in, and then with the implementation of social media and how connected it makes everyone. You have men that literally were never taught how to date, or even so much as go up to a woman and start a conversation.
Exactly. And when you learn to overcome all this stuff, man, I can almost guarantee you, I feel it in my heart that there will be a shift.
Oh,
there will be a huge shift.
Absolutely. I think without a shadow of a doubt there will be a huge shift, but it's only going to be when men wake up and realize and start demanding more respect for themselves.
And my question is when, fellas?
I mean, I see more podcasts like these getting more and more relevant, but they still get a lot of hate. And on top of that, you still have a much bigger push of men saying it's okay to be feminine.